Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together. After having braved the terrors of life outside of the studio, we come together with the horrors and the imaginings that we saw on the outside world and bring them together into a nice, safe, sanitized place, the Wait, It Gets Better podcast. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. I had Magic System. That's what I had. What did you guys have?
I had Villain.
A Villian Sidekick.
Oh, perfect. Should Villian go first? Or no, we need a recap. Seth, you want to do a recap?
Okay, let's see here. So to recap, and you guys can fill in if I'm forgetting something. This world was kind of had an ancient civilization. We're talking, like Greek, Greco-Roman, kind of city-state kind of stuff, maybe. Technology and whatnot, and basically at the height of their civilization, they had these guide stones, kind of like the Georgia guide stones that apparently got terrorized the other day. Not that everyone's opinions can be what they are on those, but but it would be like that, kind of like a Stonehenge, more or less, in different locations, and on it were kind of the guiding directions to rebuild society up to that point if terrible disaster would have happened, because in some of their prophecies and their sages were indicating that a kind of worldwide apocalypse and downfall of their civilization and culture was imminent. And so they wanted to leave a kind of a guiding path to lead people back to the kind of utopian society that they had built. On top of that, we have the unique artifact was either something connected to the guide stones or where you could travel like from one guide stone to the next using, quantum mechanics and, magic of sorts, with little amulets that reimagined or repictured the different material that each guide stone was made out of. And with the right combination, it would, bring the wearer of this amulet from one spot to the next. All of this has kind of been at our current stage lost to antiquity. There's 5 of these guide stones, I think we said, that have been found, and they've been kind of enshrined, or they're kind of this, integrated into different parts of society. And they're like a big mystery. Everybody's trying to figure out, what do they mean? How do you read what it says? What does that even mean? Are we even reading it right? Let's see. And you have one of the kings here that has kind of like a gardener in his court. And this is kind of the Reed. Can you the name?
Oh, Claude is the gardener of the palace grounds and whatnot, where these guide stones were, and they had kind of a garden around it, and
Okay. And then I think it was that Claude had found one of these amulets. I think, did you say?
Yeah, I think that was a part of that at the end there.
Okay. At the end there.
Because he had to. Well, they had found the 6th slab. So they were trying to, there was the one that was missing, and that they were thinking if they could put it together the right way, then it would all make sense. And there was this ancient hedge that he had to remove, which was really complicated because it had been, kept over centuries, literally, in pruning and shaping and whatnot. And that was the what happened in the process of that is he found one of these amulets, and
he holds the position of anti-hero.
Yeah, right.
So he might not be specific. He might be willing to do the right thing, but maybe not specifically for the right reasons.
Yeah, he has his own interest in having things be orderly.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, one of the things that brought about the catastrophe for the ancient civilization was the fact that they made the guide stones. They kind of stopped pursuing anything else and were just obsessed with saving all of their knowledge and information.
Yeah, and looking back and not seeing to the future or even taking care of business as usual.
Yeah.
And the enemies around were kind of encroaching and
So we're not in the ancient time, though, or we could be in the ancient time. if that's when the villain is introduced.
No,
But
I
do you
think
guys
the
want to do the
villain is
villain first, or do
introduced.
you want to hear about the magic system?
I think I'll go ahead and introduce the villain. It'll be pretty quick, but it kind of hinges on part of where that last one left off. When kind of introduced the villain. He is one of the, of course, because everyone's kind of all confused, like this is what the guides don't say, or this is what they do or don't say, and what they mean and don't mean. Of course, you're going to have all kinds of, let's say, religious cults spring up around this. And one of the main ones would be kind of involved in this and have this like progressive thing is how they tried to understand it. And what the villain is he's kind of an inquisitor for this one. It's kind of the, let's say, the main one of the age. It's like kind of the most powerful, let's say,
like
religious cult around like what these mean and like how are you supposed to follow the message of the guide stones and how are they going to, save your immortal soul.
Do you live your life by the stone or not?
By the stone.
Yeah. I have that. Yeah, that's a great, like, a thing that people say, like, by the stone, when they're just in regular conversation,
Yeah. It's like, well, we could, do a meeting like this or here. Well, that's not really by the stone. I'd prefer to keep it by the stone if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And what he has too, what this one has done is because the old stones are so cryptic, what they've actually developed is like the new commandments of the stone. So it's like, it's like their alliteration, but they've built it on like the perceived meaning, but then brought new, like kind of interpretation that's kind of like broad enough, but like good enough to, let's say, live your life by, that makes people feel okay. And it, kind of makes sense. And so that's kind of what has brought them pertinence, is not necessarily because they've actually taken what the stones actually say, but they've kind of made a new interpretation of it that's, let's say, moral enough, good enough, followable enough and understandable. So the majority of people can kind of hold on to it and kind of, just so long as they kind of follow the guidance of, the papacy kind of idea, they'll end up all right.
Yeah.
And what this guy is what was it? The name I had for him, Julius Trent is his name, but he's kind of an inquisitor. The only thing is that all of like this, the main head thing, they've built their entire thing around there being the 5 guide stones. And like everything in their literature has to do about like the completion of being 5 and it always 5 and the thing of being 5. However, it's really shaking them up because they found this 6th one. And so you kind of have all these apologetics going, well, it was these 5, but really it was this, maybe there's this new revealed 6th one if, people weren't going to follow. And so there's some doom and gloom side of it. And, but his job is to kind of, what he's doing is trying to kind of silence, anything about this 6th guide stone, because it's really causing, issues,
for sure.
Be it, exposing heretics. And that's kind of what his job is, this inquisitor kind of guy, and he's just kind of ruthless and conniving, and it's everything is about,
I love Julius.
Everything is about holding on to what this old systematic understanding is. And he's just, it's kind of like that his weapon is fear and surprise. His 2 weapons, fear, surprise, and complete in devotion to the it's 4 weapons. Okay, we'll come in again. Where it's like that complete and utter devotion to that understanding that it's like he gets that, bill of, permission to basically go out and, literally, burn at the stake heretics that might be, getting in the way of the current administration holding power.
Right. I kind of picture this idea that certain parts of the world have taken certain aspects of what's written on the stone and built either their culture or their religions from it. And some of them, all of them, claim to have the information and to have the sort of full understanding of the full thing. But, it's kind of like ... the point in which the stone talks about the thing that this certain religion cares the most about, and then ... It's like we really emphasize the specific area that we care about, but every single one kind of espouses the idea that they are in like sort of full synergy. They understand all of it, but then certain ones will only like reference certain verses or certain verses, aka paragraphs or portions of the stone, but they kind of claim that they follow the whole thing. So you can get like 2 sort of radically different cultures who both claim to be following the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about the villain sidekick?
Well, I was really enjoying. Yeah, Julius. He's we're sure we'll squelch any inquiry or curiosity or burn the books in the libraries, right? And if you're not towing the line, we'll come down on you. Carlos is handy to have around. He's the villain sidekick. Carlos is a big fellow. His face doesn't give away anything. He will move to violence or to be helpful with speed and dispatch and economy of movement, but with the same expression. Causing pain doesn't seem to have any effect on him at all. He doesn't seem to like causing pain or particularly dislike it. It's just he's big and powerful physically, but it's just a means to accomplish a task. He's unquestioningly loyal to Julius. And there's no discernible way to tell what actually motivates him. He's kind of a blank slate, but he's kind of looming. And there is an unquestionable, he's Julius's muscle. He's there. So
he's just a brute of a person?
Well, how could you tell? Based on the, based on his devotion to Julius keeps him around, and there's really no way of telling how he's processing information or how, what he knows or what he hears. He doesn't broadcast any of that. He's just, like I said, just unquestioningly loyal to Julius, but there's no way to tell what's really motivating him.
Okay, that's a really interesting thing. So that plays into the magic system. He is what's known as a savant.
Right. That makes sense, yeah.
Now, savants and the existence of them has been pretty known. It's been known for a long time that kings had court wizards and things like that. But everyone was sort of told that this was a thing that you what's the word? This is a thing that you learned and not a thing that you were born into.
Okay.
And in truth, being a savant is a thing that you're born into. Every person who is a savant of some type or of some capacity basically has, how do I call this? Imagine it like a bubble of awareness that sort of spreads out from the front of their forehead, and it kind of imagine like a bubble, like a soapy bubble coming out from their forehead, right? Different people's are bigger or smaller, right? Someone's might be really big, able to encompass a whole room. Mm-hmm. It can't go where you can't see. So if you're in a room, it can't leak out the windows. If you're in a small room, but your awareness is, actually like 10 feet beyond the room, it'll get squished into the room, because what it represents is your sort of area of influence.
Okay.
In this influence, every savant can do the basic things: lift things up with their mind, move things around. The farther away it gets, the weaker it gets. Savants are able to, once they've worked at this more and more, they're able to change the size. So instead of it being a really brown bubble, it's able to be, taking up, let's say 1,000 square feet. They're able to compress it down into a thin line that's able to go a lot farther.
Okay.
While in a savant's bubble, they can get they can kind of get things off of your brain, like the surface of your brain. They can read the neurons firing, and ones who are trained can learn to sense fear, learn to sense rage, learn to sense embarrassment. So it's a type of mind reading. They don't know what you're thinking. They can't tell what you're thinking, but they can kind of tell when you're about to lie because you get stressed. They can feel your heart rate increasing. Anyone who is royalty always stays within eyesight of his savant, because two savants in a room, their awareness cannot occupy the same space. So if there's a savant in a room and another savant tries to come in, it's a battle of wills as they try to, if they know each other, then they can kind of move things out of the way and make space for each other, but they cannot occupy the same space.
Cool.
Yeah. And they kind of exist in this kind of pseudo-servanthood place, never having, they were discovered in a time where slavery was really rampant, and they never quite made it out because they were just too valuable, So people are tested, there's a savant in every delivery room. There's a savant, if you're pregnant and your child is a savant, then savants would know, because they would pass by them and there would be there would be a space that they couldn't perceive inside of the mother's womb, and therefore they would it'd be immediate. They would know. So this hero, this villain's sidekick is, what's his name again?
Carlos.
That's what he is. And
Yeah.
no one can tell what he is. And people think that he's a savant, but they're not quite sure.
Right.
It's weird because the villain doesn't have him in sort of chains. He doesn't command him what to do. He acts more like his friend or like a servant than savants have to wear special clothes. They have to when you're meeting one, because basically when you're meeting one, your everything is laid bare.
Right.
They can, there are ones who can perform complex surgery. There are ones who can manipulate brain chemistry in order to do not lie detectors, but truth serum stuff, to get you. So they're used like tools, really.
Yeah, and that makes Carlos particularly valuable for the Inquisitor because he's just a blank slate. Nobody can read him.
Right.
But he just is aware of all this.
Right. And that being also one of the things is that the Inquisitor is protected by an unregistered savant.
Right.
And so, I imagine the Inquisitor travels with a number of people, and, no one quite knows which one is the one holding, protecting the savant, protecting the Inquisitor. They just know that there is somehow savants can't get close enough because they make great assassins. If the person's not protected, you don't know it. And then they just squeeze a little part of your brain and you're dead,
Yeah.
So that is the magic system.
Cool.
What do you think, Seth?
Yeah. No.
So how do we want the story to move on from here? So the Inquisitor is going on a crusade, kind of like a crusade to try and quell the information about this.
Right. Quell it until either this is, no offense against it. It's, it'd be the Church of the Stones, can come up with the right interpretable doctrine to explain what the sixth stone is.
Right.
Because again, anybody with a little bit of information is kind of gathering and, turning into this freak apocalyptic thing, or to discredit the Church of the Stones.
Didn't we determine that the hero was a scientist or something who was studying them? Mm-hmm. And then he basically found the missing link. He was a linguist or something, and he found the missing link and started to basically discover a whole bunch of science and technology and power.
Yeah.
What if the Inquisitor is not only he's there at the site where the sixth stone was found, right? And the church spared no expense and just hired on the best of the best to figure out what's going on, Mm-hmm. And that's where the hero was able to sort of get access to it and, before he was the hero, and, start working on this thing. I'm trying to figure out how exactly.
Yeah, I think at first maybe, any say archaeological thing comes about. I mean, they're always finding things, if you're in the right place and it's I'm going to make a parking lot here. Oh, and we, cleared land and, wouldn't we know it? We found all kinds of stuff. Well, of course you're going to find stuff because you're digging in let's say a archaeological rich place. Well, then that has to get shut down, and with the right funding, people come in and dig down and figure out which layer it's at and what they're finding and what, all of its importance. So like anything like that, I think that this sixth stone was, just kind of stumbled upon, and then kind of swooped up, kind of how some of that might be if someone finds something, fairly important. Let's say if a certain power that be has a greater control over, let's say, funding or access. They can kind of shut things down or control things in a certain direction. And I think, maybe that's what the Inquisitor is there to do, because when they found this, rumor started getting out, and so they kind of had to shut the site down. But of course, people already were speculating what it was, and so this, Church of the Stones kind of use their influence to basically buy out the control over what's going on. They want to figure out what it is, because of course, like there's, I think what we talked about before, what there could be in this, although like the text might, write on there and say, do not walk, more than 10 paces without stopping and, reflecting on your journey or whatever it is. And so someone might take that fairly literally, but if, with the right understanding, I think I'd mentioned this last time, there's a thought process to the old, like, ancient stories of like, Thor and Odin, or Zeus and, Hermes and, all those things that some of them have different representations on the periodic table. And so really what all these stories are telling you is, on one side, they might be telling a story, and that's great, or a moral to be learned. But then on a deeper side, they had to, catch Poseidon, and Poseidon was, whatever, he could be. They had to catch him with a net made by, woven together with, by Hermes. And, and so like, if you pay attention to the, like what it is, you could find like a chemical or like a scientific, like a net that could catch, let's say hydrogen as what, I don't know, that might not be it, but hydrogen is represented by Poseidon. And so the way that you're able to catch hydrogen out of water is by making a net out of, hair from Athena's, golden locks, and, Hermes, straps from his shoes, which were, leather. And so if you mix, gold and, skin, it can make a chemical compound that will pull nitrogen out of water. I'm making some of this up, but this is an actual thing that, people have hypothesized. And so I think, that could be what they're looking for, is these, like, let's say, secret, codes. And of course, like everyone's been looking for this key that would unlock like the true meaning of these stones, because of course it's really contested and no one knows what it is. And that's kind of what this sixth stone is. It'd be like this Rosetta Stone that's giving kind of the key to each of the different stones. I think, if each of them have 5 points to it, and then the center one also has 5 correlating with each of the different stones, I think then maybe that gives like a interpretation or a understanding on how to read each different one, maybe.
Yeah, acts as a key in some ways. I mean, that's what the Rosetta Stone was. It was like one decree written in a couple of different languages, and it was enough different languages that we could say, okay, we know a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one and a little bit of that one, and with all of that together, we can now understand everything here. Right,
like ancient Greek and then like ancient Sumerian. It was like, well, okay, we can kind of understand ancient Greek because it was, used longer than, ancient Sumerian. And so then the ancient Greek that we knew helped us understand what the Sumerian said, which then helped us understand what the hieroglyphs said. And so I think that's kind of what you got on the sixth stone. And so then it's like, I think what they're synopsized, because of course it's not put up, it was either laid down but not erected. And so the question is whether or not it was meant to stay, let's say, flat, or whether they should erect it, or, if it was torn down at some point.
Well, I think my original thought was that they basically hadn't finished it, is that they were kind of overwhelmed before they had finished it, and so it kind of got locked away, and they were kind of like, well, this is just gonna have to be good enough. It's like we wrote a bunch of stuff, ways to help them out. This is just gonna have to be good enough, because we don't really know how to do any better than this. But I like the idea of, because this culture didn't disappear after it was destroyed. It still had other writings, and those any other invading country viewed its writings in a really strange way, not really understanding why it wrote things the way it did, and also not understanding its science and how you were able to get things done, So they were kind of the ones who took the writings and, as time went by, mixed and matched information to turn it into that kind of weirder folklore mixed with science information that you were talking about, Seth.
Yeah.
I think I also want to bring back in the notion of the unique vehicle, the 7 portals.
Right.
And like the sixth stone kind of like completes the form to create that 7th portal. And then all that was lacking was the amulet. And the thing is, if the 7 portals were reanimated, so to speak, it would be a real stressor for old Julius and the cult of the 5 stones, because if this whole Congress between the different portals was reopened and different peoples around were exchanging views, so to speak, it would inhibit their plans to kind of keep a lid on it.
Okay, so I've got an idea here. So perhaps some of this part of the story here opens up with, like the Inquisitor coming in, they've taken over this site, and it's kind of like, it's like if, like anything like that would be, as they're trying to hide stuff, they're interviewing everybody, making sure, like, who have you talked to? Where have you gone? Like, what information might have you slipped out?
Right.
And so there's like some, heretic burnings, and there's, Inquisitor stuff. And I think
Inquisitor stuff. That's good.
Inquisitor stuff. And I think maybe our hero kind of sees this going on, and perhaps some of the people that, let's say, know that this isn't just, the new head of staff. This is an Inquisitor, and he's either brainwashing or killing people that are dissenting or have given out information. But perhaps like the hero and the hero's sidekick or some of the people on the dig know that what they found, like maybe they found like an old stone that has some, like a Rosetta Stone kind of idea that gives some extra information, and they're able to smuggle the hero out. And perhaps the kingdom that the gardener works at, they have kind of, I wouldn't say like become an atheist nation, but they don't play the silly games of all this
stone logic.
Not that they don't see that there's importance. I think maybe like they're a nation that has pretty much kept like any of these weird, let's say, churches out of their country. And so they've been like kind of a flock or a draw to people that just want to, let's say, read an understanding moral viewpoint of the stones. And so it's
more
like
philosophical, less than like religious devotion.
Where if it says, don't kill your neighbor, you know what, maybe we shouldn't kill each other. That we can glean from the stones that, we shouldn't go about just, killing each other because we disagree with each other. Oh, isn't that a novel idea? And maybe we should, I'm kind of thinking like reading it, like if you read the 10 Commandments idea, it's like, oh, wow, some of these things, they make sense. But then kind of more of like a rational, like, if it doesn't make sense, well, we're going to read. And, if you're going to hold to anything, you're going to hold to the, let's say, a moral, rational understanding and not get it wrapped up into too much other stuff. And so he's able to escape here. And I think then he's able to, and they kind of hide him away. And so I think that maybe makes like a chase where then this Inquisitor is going about and knows that he escaped, and he's like kind of chasing after him. I don't know if maybe or up until this point, it's kind of like a travel log where you've got the hero and maybe he's picked up a sidekick that's, able to, maybe he's got his own savant that he picks up, or maybe it can be something else. And kind of for a while they're kind of going from place to place, and then they end up finding, let's say, solace or asylum here in this one kingdom, and they're kind of able to hide him away. And maybe the king kind of knows who he is and that he's got kind of knowledge on this. And so he's kind of kept to himself that they found an amulet that would indicate that there's actually, let's say, 7 portals, not, the regular, 5. And then plus if there's, a 6th one, which if that correlates with the center stone, and then wanting to know where this 7th one would be. And so then I think maybe he takes up residency there, trying to like figure out the amulet. And then I'm like imagining like this Stargate thing where then they, got this like underground, thing where then they're like adjusting the amulet to see if they can make a combination that'll, make something work.
I was thinking of a couple of different things. One, The savants are, or the gene is the remnant of the old civilization, right? Those are the people, this old civilization was highly advanced. Everyone was a savant, right? Everyone was like this. And so the savants are the remnants of that system, and the church knows it because we're going back to Stargate. The savants can use certain items that the church has discovered to kind of affect the world. They have an item so that in their church, in their Vatican, their Vatican City, basically their city that they control, it like rains on a schedule. And they say it's something about, their connection with the whatever. But in truth, they have a team of savants who operate this machine that controls the weather. They know about the portals, and they're just trying to they thought they had it all under wraps and they knew where everything was, but all of a sudden new information, pops up. And another thing I was thinking about is no one knows where this civilization used to live. They don't know in which part of the world, because at first I was thinking that the stones were sort of in place, like Stonehenge, and hadn't been moved, but I like it better that they sort of surfaced over time, and then the church kind of erected them in order to, cement itself as powerful. But I have this feeling that the church is the controlling power of the church is the remnant of the country that attacked this country at the beginning.
Okay.
And not to get against churches or anything, but the sort of fanatical kind of dogmatic close-mindedness that can oftentimes come with religion, when you teach someone not to think but instead just to believe. That's what these original civilization was fighting against. That's who they were overwhelmed by, was by zealous fanatics, destroying everything that they burning all their books, destroying all of their science. And then what we see now in the sort of modern day is literally just the logical escalation of that. And here in the one country where the anti-hero and the hero flee to is a holdout, a place where a guy isn't quite convinced that this is the way to go, who maybe he himself is a savant, and all of his the king and all of his family are savants. This is like the one place where they have like freedom and equal standing. So then when the hero arrives, immediately they don't trust him, but then the anti-hero has to prove to them why he's worthy of trust, because to the hero, to the king and to his royal family, you have to be a savant in order to be considered a good person. And it's only this one gardener that we trust who's not, but then the anti-hero convinces him to listen to him as the hero begins to lay out all of this information, about what the truth of it. Here he has the writings. This is what's on the 6th scroll. And it makes, maybe it makes a lot of sense to the savants. Maybe the reason why people were confused about the interpretation of the guidestones for so long is because it required the savants' specific brain makeup. It didn't really make sense to anyone else.
Okay, so here's an idea.
Wait, just 1 second. I'll get done with mine and then you can get to yours. What we realize is that the ancient civilization wasn't leaving a guide for all of humanity to get back to power and to success, but literally for the savants to get back. Here's how our people can come back. What's your idea, Seth?
Okay, so it was an idea. Someone was theorizing on the languages and the alphabets and stuff, and it would be the idea. So if you write something on the page, if you write as we would understand, A, B, C, D. Is the letter and the form of what you're writing really the, let's say, the, pyramid type shape of the A, or is it all the space around the A? Is the real letter really what's coming from outside, around what you're then covering up to then show what's around it? Or is it really the quote unquote letter you've drawn? And so perhaps maybe that's the key for the savant. Not that there isn't, let's say, a language that they can read and understand. Oh, it says this story, it says this and that and the other thing. But perhaps it's like an even, let's say, a deeper, language that from the savants, they'd be able to figure it out, or somehow with how, they could put it all together by not seeing what's, directly written, but actually what's around what's written. That's actually their alphabet, is the space around the letters. And so no one's thought of that because they see these, etches and scratches. And so we have to go, okay, if they have 3 scratches with a line underneath of it, that must mean like, a hand, a closed palm, because it's got, did I say 3 or 4 scratches? I think like 4 scratches within a line underneath. And if you put your hand together, that could look like the thumb sitting underneath the thing. So that could be like stop, a halt. And, I'm just, imagining how something like that might develop into, a pictograph or a, thing. And so if it has to do with, I don't know. But really what's going on is the spaces around, the readable alphabet, by everybody else. And that's like, maybe that's the key that's been missing for the savants.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, I was thinking of a crazy left field take on this. And here's the reality, is that the ancient civilization is a colony here from another planet, developed evolutionarily along the same lines, so seeded from the same people that was on this planet millions of years ago, so that, you could breed, between the two species and still have the results of, still have children. And they, with their better technology and their higher understanding, created this, they had a colony. They were trying to make peace with the world, whatever. And they basically, the gates are for transporting around the world, but they're also for transporting them back.
And that's the 7th gate.
So that's the 7th gate. When they were like, things are going really bad here. We need to leave, right? We need to build, which is going to take like 10 or 20 years to build the complex systems inside of these stones in order to, separate all of the molecules the way they're supposed to and do all the work that we need to do with them, and to create this gate to travel, hundreds and millions of light years away. They had finished all of it. And then what they did is they're like, what we're going to do is we're going to inscribe on here all of our teachings so that when we go, the people who are left over, maybe after, 10,000, 100,000 years after they've evolved a little bit more, can like see the sense, can stop fighting us just because they're fanatics, and kind of recognize humanity and, they just need to evolve a little bit more. They're too wartimey now. They just need to become a little bit less tribalistic, organize a little bit, and they'll be able to, no prime directive breaking qualms on their side. They're like, we're going to teach them how to become a better civilization. And they fail, obviously, because they go too hard on this, and they lose their borders break down, and they're dispersed off, and their scientists and things melt off into the, as they're taken captive and made slaves, and then their abilities are discovered, and so then they're made into fighting slaves, and even they forget over the years, what they were originally. And that's why the gene kind of comes up every once in a while, because the genetics is still out there. It's not as nearly as powerful as it used to be, but it's still like pretty friggin' powerful now, And so the end of this story is basically the hero helping like a group of these savants who he is going to, he's not use them, but they're going to help him to open the seventh gate for some reason. They're not like sure why, you know. They're not sure where it goes, but then they open it and it's kind of like a space straight back to their home planet, you know. And only savants can go. Only people who have enough of the gene can go through, you know. And basically anyone who's presenting the savant power can go through. You know,
they have to use the amulet and use whatever their savant power to open. Like that's part of the key of it is then they have to open.
Yeah.
They have to open it.
Yeah. Which hasn't been a thing because savants have been, you know, hidden away and haven't been given proper education. And there's just all of these things which you might think, well, that would never happen. But happy little accidents like that happen all the time. Like razor thin margins for things happen all the time. So, you know, this is just like really a bunch of really specific things kind of lining up, you know? So like a bunch of savants who have like the hero has talked to a lot and they're like, they want to take their freedom, but they like don't know how to, you know, they are so kind of brainwashed that it's kind of just like second nature to them to obey. You know, there's just like all these little things where finally they're given the opportunity to basically step through this portal and, you know, go home, you know, to whatever it is on the other side. And some decide to go and some decide not to, you know. And I think that's kind of a good end of the story because it's like the hero is sort of your antithesis of like anti-slavery and he doesn't like the whole savant system, you know, and it makes him uncomfortable, but he doesn't get to join in all of the I told you so's because he doesn't get to be a savant himself, you know. He just like helps the king and all of the, you know, the king's family and his guard and everyone who's in that little kingdom and all the savants they've picked up along the way to sort of make their way through this thing to whatever lies on the other side.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, let me know. At me on Twitter at @GetsBettercast. Or send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you didn't like this episode, that's fine. I only worked on it for 10 hours just for you. But you can also wait because it does get better on the next episode.